The story begins in a quiet neighborhood where a large house stood at the end of the street. Every morning, before the sun fully rose, a woman walked through its gate, carrying a small bag in one hand and her daughter's hand in the other. The woman came to the house every day to work, cleaning rooms, washing dishes, and doing whatever tasks the family needed. Her daughter came along because she had no one else to stay with, and the woman never liked leaving her alone. The little girl was calm by nature. She never ran around or caused trouble. Instead, she observed things silently, as if she understood more than she ever said. Whenever they entered the house, she would sit quietly in the corner while her mother worked. The family who lived there noticed how calm she was, but they never gave it much thought. To them, she was simply the maid's daughter, a quiet child who kept to herself. But there was something about the girl that most people missed. Her eyes always searched the room the moment she entered. She didn't look at the food on the table or the toys the other children left lying around. Her attention went straight toward the large piano standing gracefully in the living room. It was polished and shiny, placed near the window where morning light fell across its surface. It was the most beautiful thing in the house to her, and whenever she looked at it, a soft brightness came into her eyes. One her mother often noticed but never understood. The piano was rarely used except on weekends, when the family's older child practiced. Their child had a tutor who came once a week, and the lessons filled the house with gentle tunes. The girl would sit nearby, listening carefully. She didn't have a phone or books to keep her busy, so she listened to those notes almost as if she was storing them inside her heart. One morning, the family's child practiced before leaving for school. The tutor encouraged them to continue practicing daily, reminding them that skills grow only when effort is made. After the lesson ended, the tutor left, and the busy morning noise in the house died down. The girl sat on the floor near her mother, who was dusting a shelf. She wasn't trying to disturb anyone, but when she heard the last echo of the piano key fading, she shifted her gaze toward the piano again. Almost unconsciously, she was fascinated, but she didn't know whether she had the right to even think about touching it. To her, the piano felt like something very far away from her world, something only people with money or privilege could go near. She kept her hands on her lap while her eyes remained fixed on it, quietly imagining what it must feel like to press those black and white keys. The mother glanced at her daughter and gave a small smile. She knew that expression well. It was the same look the girl sometimes had when they passed by music shops on their way home. But the mother had always believed dreams needed money, and money was something they barely had. So she didn't say anything, choosing instead to let her daughter dream peacefully. Even if she feared the dream would forever stay out of reach, the family members moved around the house during the morning. The oldest member of the house, a kind elder, noticed the girl staring at the piano. He often saw her gazing at it with a look of deep longing. He didn't say anything to her, but he always wondered what went on in her mind. He had learned from life that children sometimes carried dreams so silently that even their own parents didn't notice their depth. A little later, the family's younger child walked into the living room and saw the maid's daughter looking at the piano again. The younger child didn't think much about it and simply sat on the sofa, scrolling on a device. After a few seconds, the child asked, "Why do you always sit like that and stare at the piano? Do you think you can play it?" The girl didn't respond at first. She looked down at her hands, suddenly afraid she had done something wrong. She wasn't used to being addressed directly by the family's children. When she finally looked up, she shook her head slightly. Not confident enough to speak, the younger child laughed lightly, not out of cruelty, but out of assumption. The child figured that the girl probably didn't know anything about music and only liked the sound it made. It never crossed the child's mind that the girl could be interested in anything more than watching. But the girl wasn't upset. She simply felt shy. She didn't know how to explain that music made her feel calm and happy. She didn't know how to say that she often imagined the sound of piano keys, even when she wasn't near one. She kept these emotions inside, letting them grow quietly like seeds in a hidden garden. Her mother finished cleaning the shelves and moved to the kitchen. The girl followed her, staying close. The mother knew her daughter wasn't bothered by the comment, but she placed a gentle hand on the girl's head anyway, just to remind her she wasn't alone out later in the day. The mother took a break, sitting near the back door where a small breeze came through. The girl sat beside her. They didn't talk much. They never needed many words to understand each other. The mother often said that her daughter had a way of speaking through her silence. A few minutes passed peacefully, and then they heard someone practicing on the piano again. The girl turned her head slightly, listening to the notes. She closed her eyes, trying to trace each sound with her mind. The mother watched her carefully, noticing how the girl's fingers moved slightly on her lap, as if trying to follow the rhythm without drawing attention. It was small moments like this that made the mother realize how deep her daughter's interest was. She didn't know how long the girl had been quietly falling in love with music. She wished she had more to offer, but life had always been a matter of surviving day by day. The afternoon went by slowly. The house became quieter as people left for work or school. The mother continued cleaning different rooms, while the girl sat nearby, always staying within sight. When they returned to the living room, the mother went to tidy the sofa, while the girl sat on the floor again, lost in her own world. The piano seemed almost magical in the silence of the room. The sunlight hit it just right, making it look warm and inviting. The girl found herself drawn toward it more than usual. She didn't plan to move. She just did. She scooted closer, inch by inch. She didn't touch anything. She only wanted to sit near it, just once, to see it up close. Before she realized it, she was sitting directly in front of the piano bench. She stared at the keys for a long moment, feeling her heart beat harder than usual. She lifted her hand a little, not enough to actually touch the keys, just enough to feel the air above them. Then suddenly, she heard footsteps. The girl quickly pulled her hand back and lowered her head. It was the younger child again. The child walked over and looked at her curiously. "Are you trying to play?" the child asked with a teasing smile. "You can't play this. It's too hard even for me." The girl shook her head again, her cheeks warming with embarrassment. She hadn't meant to get so close, and she didn't like being misunderstood. She whispered softly, almost too quiet to hear, "I wasn't trying. I was just looking." The child didn't respond right away. Instead, the child walked around the room, picking up toys. The child didn't seem angry or bothered, just amused. Her mother entered the room a moment later and saw her daughter sitting near the piano. The mother's heart tightened. She worried someone might think the girl was trying to touch things she shouldn't, which could create problems. She gently took her daughter's hand and guided her back to the corner, whispering, "Sit here, dear. It's better." The girl nodded and obeyed. She didn't protest, though her heart still carried a quiet ache. She wasn't sad because she got pulled away. She was sad because she knew she would never get close enough to the piano to feel the keys under her fingers. The day carried on, and soon it was time for the mother and daughter to leave. The girl glanced one more time at the piano before they walked out of the house. This time, instead of longing, there was a quiet determination in her eyes, though she didn't fully understand it yet. She held her mother's hand tightly as they walked home. The streets were busy, filled with vendors, school children, and the noise of daily life. But through all that noise, the girl heard the memory of piano notes playing in her mind. She hummed them softly, step by step, making sure she didn't forget a single sound she had heard that day. Her mother looked at her and smiled gently. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if her daughter would ever get the chance to touch a piano. But she knew one thing for certain. Some dreams grow even in silence. And sometimes the quietest children carry the biggest stories inside them. And the girl, though unaware of what was waiting ahead, walked with a small spark in her heart, one that music had placed there long ago. She didn't know that this spark would one day change everything for her mother, and even for the household that barely noticed her now. She only knew that music made her feel alive. And for now, that was enough. The next morning began the same way it always did. The woman and her daughter walked toward the house together, the mother moving with quiet purpose, while the girl took smaller steps beside her. But something about the girl was different that day. She looked thoughtful, almost like she had spent the entire night replaying a memory in her mind. And she had been hearing the piano notes over and over again, as clearly as if someone was still playing them beside her bed. The mother didn't ask what her daughter was thinking about. She had grown used to her child living inside her own quiet world. But she sensed a stronger feeling inside her daughter today, like a hidden wish that was slowly rising to the surface. When they reached the house, the day had barely started. The younger child of the family had left early for school, and the living room was quiet. The piano sat untouched, covered by morning light once again. The girl glanced at it only once, but that one glance carried the same longing she had always felt. Her mother went to the kitchen, while she sat in the same corner near the living room. She didn't move closer to the piano this time. She remembered how her mother had gently pulled her away the day before. She didn't want to trouble her mother or the family. So she stayed where she was, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The housekeeper of the family, who was different from her own mother, passed by and gave the girl a small smile. The housekeeper had known the maid and her daughter for years and often felt protective of them. She had once asked the little girl why she stared at the piano so much. The girl had only smiled shyly and shrugged, not ready to explain how deeply she wished to touch it. A while later, the older family member, the gentle elder, walked in and noticed the girl sitting alone. He had a habit of observing things quietly. He wasn't the type to jump to conclusions. Instead, he liked to understand people by watching them. He sat down on a chair nearby and said softly, "You like sitting here, don't you?" The girl nodded, her eyes dropping to the floor. She didn't speak unless necessary, and she always spoke very softly when she did. The elder didn't ask her any more questions. He simply looked at the piano thoughtfully, as if he knew something unspoken was happening inside the girl's heart. He eventually left the room, and silence returned. The mother came back to the living room with a bucket and cloth, wiping furniture while humming softly to herself. The girl listened to her mother's humming for a while before turning her attention back to the piano. She didn't move. She only watched Dot. Later that morning, something unexpected happened. The family's older child entered the living room. This child was more serious than their younger sibling, more focused and disciplined. They were the one who took piano lessons every week. They sat down at the piano and began to practice. The girl straightened her back slightly, as if the first note had awakened something inside her again. She listened carefully to every key the older child pressed. She didn't look away even once. The older child noticed her staring, but didn't say anything. They were used to people watching during practice, but they didn't realize how different this girl was from other observers. She wasn't watching idly. She was studying, absorbing, memorizing. The child's tutor arrived a few minutes later. The tutor was strict but talented. They corrected the older child frequently, asking them to adjust finger positions, slow down, or repeat a certain part. The girl listened to everything, the mistakes, the corrections, the improvements. It was as if her mind was recording every note and every instruction dot at one point During the lesson, the tutor played a full piece to demonstrate. The girl closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music sink into her memory. She didn't have a phone or device to record it. She didn't have sheet music. She didn't even know the names of the notes. But she had her ears, and she trusted them more than anything. When the lesson ended, the tutor left, and the older child went to get a snack from the kitchen. The piano stood silent once again. The girl stared at it, but she stayed in her place, not daring to move closer. Her mother looked at her from across the room and sighed quietly. She knew what her daughter wanted, and yet she didn't know how to give it to her. As the hours passed, the girl's curiosity grew stronger. She felt anxious in a way she didn't understand. She wanted to touch the piano, not just to see how it felt, but to know if the music in her mind sounded the same through her fingers. She felt the notes dancing inside her, begging for a way out. But she didn't move. Around midday, the younger child returned home from school. They tossed their bag on the sofa and walked toward the piano. They pressed a few random keys, not really practicing, just playing around. The girl watched, her fingers twitching slightly on her lap. She wasn't jealous. She simply wished she could try too, even once. The younger child noticed her watching again and smirked lightly. "Why do you look at it like that?" the child asked. "Do you actually think you can play something?" The girl hesitated, then whispered, I listen." The younger child raised an eyebrow. "Everybody listens. That doesn't mean anything." The girl wanted to explain more, but words weren't her strength. She looked down again, and a moment passed quickly. The mother came back into the room and asked her daughter to stand up so she could sweep under the sofa. The girl quietly moved out of the way. After lunch, the family settled into their routines. The mother continued her work, going from room to room, while the girl followed her for a while. But every time they entered a room without the piano, the girl seemed slightly distracted, like her heart was still sitting in the living room. When they returned to the living room to clean the floor, the girl found herself standing near the piano again. She didn't sit on the bench. She only stood near it, looking at the keys gently as if they were sleeping. Her mother looked up and saw her daughter standing there. The mother felt worried, not angry, but afraid. She walked over and placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Don't stay too close," she whispered. "Someone might misunderstand." The girl nodded and stepped away, but her mother saw something in her daughter's eyes that she had never seen so clearly before, a deep, quiet ache. It wasn't just curiosity. It wasn't just interest. It was longing. A longing so strong that the mother felt a sudden heaviness in her own chest. The day passed slowly after that. The girl helped her mother by bringing small items when needed, folding napkins, or sitting quietly while her mother rested for a few minutes. But every time the sound of a piano note echoed somewhere in the house, even faintly, the girl lifted her head like a plant turning toward sunlight. In the late afternoon, while the mother was in another room polishing a mirror, the girl wandered back toward the living room. She didn't mean to go there. Her feet just moved on their own. When she reached the doorway, she froze. The room was empty. No family members. No noise. Just the piano sitting under the warm glow of the setting sun. She walked slowly toward it, not to touch it, but to look at it closely. She leaned forward just enough to see her small reflection in the glossy surface above the keys. Her heart thumped like it was trying to push her forward. She raised her hand again, hovering just above the keys, barely an inch away. She didn't press anything, but for a moment she imagined she did. She imagined a note ringing out soft and sweet. She imagined the sound filling the room. She imagined how her mother's eyes would widen as she heard her. Her fingers trembled with the wish to try, even if just one note, just one dot. Then suddenly, The sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. The girl's heart jumped. She quickly lowered her hand and stepped back from the piano. She didn't want trouble. She didn't want anyone to think she was being bold. The younger child entered the room again and saw her standing near the piano. "You're here again?" the child said, half amused. "You really like staring at this thing." The girl backed away a little, embarrassed. She whispered, "I'm sorry." The child shrugged. "I was just going to play something. You can listen if you want." The girl nodded. Listening was the one thing she always had permission to do. So she sat on the floor again, leaning slightly forward, focusing on every movement of the child's fingers as they pressed random keys. But something new happened next. The younger child looked at her and asked, "Do you want to try pressing one key?" "Just one?" The girl didn't breathe for a moment. Her eyes widened with a mixture of hope and fear. She wasn't sure if this was a trick or a genuine offer. She glanced toward the hallway, wondering if her mother or anyone else would see. Then she looked back at the child. She opened her mouth slightly, but no words came out. The child laughed softly. "You're so scared. It's just a piano. It won't bite." The girl swallowed hard, unsure what to do. Then the child asked again, "Do you want to try playing even one note?" The question hung in the air like a trembling thread. Girl didn't know this moment, this tiny offer was the beginning of something greater than she could imagine. All she knew was that her heart was beating louder than the quiet room around her, and she wanted to say yes, even if her voice was too small to carry the word. The girl sat frozen for a moment after hearing the younger child's question. She didn't know how to answer. Her heart wanted to say yes so badly, but her mind kept reminding her of all the rules she had learned since she was little. Rules about not touching things that didn't belong to her. Rules about staying quiet. Rules about never drawing attention. The younger child waited, tapping a finger on the piano's edge. "It's just one key," the child said again. "Go on. Try it." The girl's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. She didn't trust her voice. She simply nodded, very gently, almost like a leaf shaking in weak wind. The child stepped aside from the piano bench, as if offering her the throne of a kingdom. The girl stood slowly. Her legs felt weak, as if the ground might vanish beneath her feet. She looked around the room first, checking to see if her mother or anyone else was watching. The hallway was empty. The house echoed with quiet. Afternoon stillness. She approached the piano with the careful steps of someone stepping into holy space. The bench was still warm from the younger child sitting there a minute earlier. She didn't sit right away. She stood in front of the piano, hands hanging at her sides. "Sit," the younger child said. She did, very gently. She sat so lightly that it looked as though she was afraid the bench would break. Her feet dangled above the floor. She wasn't tall enough for them to touch. But she didn't think about that now. All she saw were the piano keys, bright, smooth, waiting. She lifted her hands slowly, almost trembling. Her fingers hovered above the keys, like small birds uncertain about landing. Then she lowered her index finger onto a single white key. One soft note rang through the room. It was the smallest sound. Just a single tone, but to her it felt like a door opening inside her mind. Her heart thudded hard. She withdrew her hand quickly, as if she had touched fire. The younger child burst out laughing. Not cruelly, but with surprise. "You act like it bit you. It's just sound." The girl shook her head shyly and looked down. But inside, she wasn't laughing. She was amazed. That one sound had reached a part of her she never knew music could reach. She wanted to touch it again. The younger child leaned forward. "Try another one. Or the black ones." The girl looked at the black keys too, those raised pieces that she had always found mysterious. Her hand moved on its own this time. She pressed a black key. The note was higher, sharper. She felt something spark inside her chest. She pressed another white key dot, then another. She didn't play a song. She just pressed random keys, listening to each sound, matching it in her memory with the piano lessons she had heard earlier. She wasn't trying to impress the younger child. She wasn't even thinking about anything around her. She was somewhere else entirely, lost inside the sound. The younger child was watching her carefully now. The child had expected the girl to hit keys clumsily or laugh nervously. But something about the girl's face made the child pause. The girl's eyes looked focused, really focused. She pressed the keys with surprising care, not banging or fumbling, but touching each one as though learning its name. "You're not bad," the younger child said, sounding confused more than impressed. The girl looked up in surprise. That was the first compliment she had ever received about anything musical. She didn't smile. She didn't know how to respond. She simply lowered her gaze shyly again. She wanted to keep pressing keys, but footsteps suddenly echoed from the hallway. Her heart jumped. She slid off the bench fast and walked backward until she reached her usual corner. The younger child rolled their eyes. "You're so scared all the time," the child said, shaking their head. But the child didn't stop her. The girl sat down quickly, acting as if nothing had happened. Her mother walked into the room a moment later. She glanced at her daughter, then at the piano. She noticed the girl's slightly flushed cheeks and her trembling hands. A mother knew these signs. Something had happened, but the mother didn't ask. She didn't want to embarrass her daughter in front of anyone. After a short while, the mother and daughter moved to another part of the house for chores. But the girl's steps felt lighter, almost like she was walking on a cloud. She had pressed a piano key, no, several keys. She had heard her own fingers produce sound. A small moment, but a powerful one dot as they cleaned the hallway mirror. The mother finally whispered, "Did you touch it?" The girl hesitated, then nodded once. "Did someone ask you to?" Her mother asked softly, dot again. The girl nodded, dot her mother sighed, but not angrily. There was fear, yes, fear of trouble, fear of someone accusing her daughter of misbehaving. But there was something else, too. Something like warmth. Pride, maybe. She didn't want to encourage her daughter because she was scared of giving hope where life gave none. But inside, a small piece of her heart was glad. "It's all right," the mother whispered finally. "Just be careful." The girl nodded. But her heart was already drifting back to the piano, to the sound that still echoed in her chest dot later in the day. When the older family member passed by the living room, he saw the piano bench slightly pulled out, as if someone small had sat there. He glanced at the girl, who quickly lowered her eyes. He didn't ask anything, but something told him that the quiet child had crossed an invisible line today. In a good way. The day moved on, and nothing else special happened, at least on the outside. But inside the girl's mind, something new was planted. A small courage. A sense of possibility. The next day, when they returned to the house, the girl didn't run to the piano. She didn't even look at it much at first. She didn't want to seem eager. But her ears stayed alert, waiting for the moment the piano might awaken Dot, and that moment came. The older child began practicing scales in the morning. The girl listened from across the room. She paid attention not only to the sound, but to the rhythm of the child's fingers. She remembered how the tutor corrected the child's hand posture. She remembered how the child practiced with both hands separately. Then something happened that the girl didn't expect. The tutor arrived early that day and played a complex piece to demonstrate a technique. The girl had heard many songs, but this one felt different. It was full of emotion, full of movement, full of something she couldn't name. She memorized it instantly. Not the names, she didn't know music names, but the sound, the rise and fall of the notes, the pattern, the feeling. When the tutor and the older child left the room to get water, the living room grew quiet again. The piano sat alone, almost calling her. The younger child walked in and noticed her staring at it. "You can try again," the child said casually, not realizing the power of those words. The girl shook her head at first. She didn't want to take advantage. She didn't want to get in trouble, but her heart pulled her forward stronger than before. The child sat on the sofa and said, "Look, I don't care if you touch it. Just don't bang on it. You're better than I thought anyway." That small encouragement was enough. The girl walked quietly to the piano and sat down. Her feet dangled again. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She remembered the piece the tutor had played, the difficult one, the one full of emotion. She pressed a key dash softly, then another. She didn't play perfectly. She didn't even know what she was playing, but she found pieces of the melody, bringing it back from her memory. Slowly at first, then with growing confidence, the younger child sat up straight. How do you know that?" the child asked, astonished. The girl didn't answer. She didn't know how to explain. She didn't know how to say that the music stuck inside her head like glue, that every note she ever heard stayed with her. Her mother entered the room just then and froze when she saw her daughter sitting at the piano. For a moment, she looked scared. Then her fear softened when she heard the notes. The mother didn't interrupt. The girl continued pressing keys, chasing the melody she had memorized. She played with pure emotion, even though she didn't know the proper technique. The younger child remained silent. The room filled with a sound that didn't belong to a girl who had never touched an instrument before. It belonged to someone with a heart full of music. Then, suddenly, the older child returned. The girl snapped out of the moment. She pulled her hands away and slid off the bench quickly, head lowered, ready to be scolded. But the older child didn't speak right away. They stared at the keys, then at the girl. Did you just play part of the tutor song?" the older child asked, confused. The girl shook her head quickly, afraid, but the younger child blurted out, "She did. She was playing it, and it sounded real." The older child blinked, trying to understand. They didn't laugh. They didn't mock. They looked thoughtful. Her mother stepped forward, ready to apologize, but the older child raised a hand gently to stop her. "It's fine," the older child said. She didn't harm anything. But the girl could feel something shift in the room. Something big. The older child then asked, "Will you play again? Just a little?" The girl widened her eyes in shock. No one had ever asked her to play anything. She didn't know how to respond. She looked at her mother. Her mother hesitated, then nodded slowly, and the girl, gathering every bit of courage inside her small body, whispered softly for the first time, Can I play for my mom?" It was still early when the sun pushed through the thin curtains of the small servant room. The girl woke before her mother did, as she often did these days. Ever since the moment she played the piano in the big house, her mind had been filled with sounds. She felt as if music followed her everywhere, living inside her steps and breathing softly in her ears. She sat up quietly and looked at her mother, who was still sleeping after returning late from extra work the night before. Her mother had been more tired recently, but also happier. There was a new light in her eyes, something between pride and hope. The girl wanted to hold on to that feeling forever. She washed her face, tied her hair, and stepped outside. The morning air was cool but soft. Birds were already calling to each other. She didn't have a piano, but sometimes she would tap soft rhythms on the wooden bench behind the house, imagining the keys under her fingers. Every time she did, She felt as if she were somewhere else, somewhere wide and bright. Inside the big house that her mother worked in, things were still quiet. The family had not yet woken, but the kitchen helpers were already preparing for the day. When the girl stepped inside the back entrance, a few of them greeted her with warm smiles. Ever since they heard about the night she played, their behavior toward her had changed. Not in a dramatic way, but in small, gentle ways. An extra piece of fruit saved for her, a question about school, a pat on the shoulder. She knew they didn't do it out of pity. They did it because they had been surprised. They had seen something in her that they never expected from a child who usually stayed in the background. Later that morning, the family gathered in the dining room. The girl stayed near the corner, helping her mother with small tasks. She didn't want to disturb anyone. But the lady of the house glanced at her several times, as if thinking about something. After breakfast, the lady called both the girl and her mother to the living room. Her mother looked nervous, unsure if they had made a mistake somewhere, but the lady's face was calm. She asked the girl to sit down. Then she asked her mother to take a seat, too. The girl's heart began to beat faster. The lady explained that she had been thinking about that evening, the evening the girl played for her mother. She said she had not been able to forget it. She described how the household had gone silent, how the child's fingers moved with such honesty, and how something about that moment had touched her deeply. She said she believed that talent like that should not remain hidden. The girl looked down at her hands, unsure what to say or how to feel. She had never been spoken to like this before. The lady then shared something unexpected. She revealed that she had once dreamed of becoming a musician herself, but her life had moved in a different direction. She said she had always believed music had a special power, and seeing the girl play reminded her of that dream. Her mother listened quietly, holding her breath. She didn't want to hope too much. Hope could be dangerous for someone who worked hard all her life. And the lady said something that made both of them freeze. She said she wanted to help the girl learn music properly, not just a few lessons. She wanted to sponsor her training. For a moment, the room felt still, as if the world itself had paused. The girl stared at the lady and then at her mother. She didn't know if she understood everything, but she felt the weight of it. Her mother began to shake her head gently, saying it was too much, too kind, too expensive. She explained that they were only workers and didn't want to be a burden. But the lady insisted calmly. She said she didn't see it as charity. She saw it as investment in talent, and in a child who clearly had potential. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, though she tried to hide them. The girl looked at her mother, unsure if she should feel excited or scared. The idea of learning music properly was something she had never even imagined. It felt like something that belonged to another world. Later that day, after returning to their small room, the girl and her mother sat on the floor together. Neither spoke for a long time. The mother finally wiped her eyes and looked at her daughter. She said that sometimes life gives unexpected doors. Not every door stays open. Some close quickly. She told her daughter that if this door was opening, they should at least look inside. The girl leaned against her mother's shoulder. She didn't speak, but she felt something growing in her chest, a mixture of fear, excitement, and gratitude. The following days brought change. The lady arranged for the girl to meet a music teacher in the city. Patient man with kind eyes. He listened to her play on a small keyboard and smiled. He said she had something rare, something natural. The lessons began soon after. Once a week, the girl and her mother would travel by bus to a small music school. The girl would practice while her mother waited outside on a wooden chair, sometimes dozing off from exhaustion. The girl practiced with all her heart. She was shy, but when her fingers touched the keys, the shyness faded. She played with the memory of her mother, watching her that night. She played for that feeling at home. She practiced on a cardboard piano her teacher made for her. He drew the keys with a black marker and told her to memorize the spacing, the movement, the rhythm. She practiced for hours. Her mother sometimes watched her silently, moved by how seriously her daughter took each lesson. The lady of the house noticed it too. Each week, she would ask how the lessons were going, but not everyone reacted kindly. Some people whispered that a maid's daughter should not waste time on things like music. Some thought it was foolish. Others felt jealous and said unkind things behind their backs. The girl heard bits of it sometimes, though no one said it to her face. It hurt her. She wasn't used to being talked about. She had never wanted attention. All she wanted was to play. One afternoon, her mother found her sitting alone behind the house, the cardboard keyboard resting on her lap. The girl looked upset. Her mother sat beside her and waited. Finally, the girl asked her mother if people would always talk, if they would always think badly of her. Her mother put a hand over her daughter's small fingers and told her something she had learned the hard way. People talk no matter what you do. If you fail, they talk. If you rise, they talk even more. She told her daughter that if she wanted to go farther in life, she had to learn to walk past voices that tried to stop her. The girl listened carefully. She didn't fully understand everything, but she understood enough. She decided she would keep playing, no matter what. The lessons grew harder. Her fingers sometimes ached, but her teacher kept encouraging her. He said pain meant growth. One evening, something unexpected happened again. The man of the house returned home earlier than usual. He heard the faint sound of piano keys coming from the back room, where the small keyboard had been kept. When he entered the room, he saw the girl practicing with deep focus. He stood quietly and watched her. She didn't notice him at first. When she finally looked up and saw him, she froze. But instead of being upset, he nodded slowly and said, "Continue." It was the first time he had spoken to her directly. The girl hesitated, but began playing again. Her hands trembled at first, but the notes returned to their usual softness. When she finished, he simply said "good" and walked out. It wasn't much, but coming from someone who rarely showed emotion, it meant something. Her mother heard about it later and felt a quiet pride spread over her heart. The girl continued to grow, little by little. She still helped her mother with chores. She still lived humbly. But something inside her was expanding like a small flame that had finally been given air. And she didn't know it yet, but life was preparing another moment. A moment bigger than the one she had already lived. A moment that would test her, lift her, and place her in front of people who never expected someone like her to shine. That moment was getting closer with each note she played. The day that changed everything arrived quietly, without any dramatic sign. The girl woke up early, just like she always did, and helped her mother prepare for the morning. But deep inside her chest, her heart felt different, heavy with excitement, yet nervous in a way she couldn't explain. Her teacher had told her the week before that she would be performing in a small student showcase at the music school. It wasn't a big event, no cameras, no famous guests, but it was the first time she would play in front of people who didn't know her. The idea of being on a real stage made her feel both thrilled and frightened. She hadn't told anyone at the big house about the showcase. She didn't want to create expectations. She wanted the moment to stay hers for a little longer, like a secret she wasn't ready to let go of. Her mother was the only one who knew, and she had taken the day off just so she could be there. She had said she wouldn't miss it for anything in the world. When they reached the music school, the building hummed with quiet chatter. Other students stood holding their sheet music, whispering last-minute fears to their parents. Some wore shiny new clothes, polished shoes, carefully combed hair. The girl wore her usual clean dress. It wasn't new, and it wasn't fancy, but her mother had pressed it neatly the night before. She had braided her daughter's hair with more care than usual. That little extra effort made the girl feel special. Inside the hall, rows of chairs faced the small stage. A simple black piano sat in the center under warm yellow lights. The girl stared at it, feeling the weight of the moment. Her teacher came to greet her. He crouched slightly to meet her eyes. He didn't give a long speech or talk about technique. He simply said, "Play with your heart." That is enough. Those words settled her nerves a little. As the audience took their seats, the girl and her mother found a place backstage. Her mother squeezed her hand gently and whispered that she was proud no matter what happened. One by one, the other students performed. Some stumbled. Some played confidently. Some forgot notes. Some made the audience smile. Then the girl heard her name. Her legs felt light and shaky at the same time. She stepped onto the stage slowly, hearing the soft creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet. The hall felt larger now. The piano looked bigger than she remembered. She sat down, her feet barely touching the ground. She closed her eyes for a moment. She didn't think about the audience. She didn't think about the whispers from people who said she didn't belong. She didn't think about the long bus rides, the cardboard keyboard, or the late nights her mother stayed. Awake helping her practice dot, she thought about one thing: the night she played for her mother in the big house. The moment everything began, when she placed her fingers on the keys, the rest of the world faded. She began to play. The notes flowed gently, at first soft, searching, careful. Then they grew stronger, lifting like a tiny bird testing its wings. She played with feeling, not perfection. She played with memory, not pride. The hall went silent. No footsteps, no whispers, no shifting in chairs. Just her music filling the space. By the time she finished, the girl felt something warm in her chest. Not pride, not relief, something softer. Something like peace. When she lifted her hands from the keys, the audience remained quiet for a few seconds, as if they needed time to return from wherever the music had taken them. Then the applause came. Gentle at first, then growing. Her mother clapped with tears in her eyes. Her teacher smiled, not surprised at all. The girl stood, bowed shyly, and walked off the stage. Her mother took her into her arms, whispering over and over that she was proud. She didn't expect anything more from the day. She had already received more than she hoped for, but life often surprises people when they least expect it. Later that afternoon, as the girl and her mother were preparing to leave the school, they heard someone call out to them. It was the lady of the big house. The girl froze. She hadn't known the lady would come. Her mother looked just as surprised. The lady approached them slowly, her eyes warm with emotion. She explained that the teacher had invited her, wanting her to see the girl perform. She said she had come without telling anyone, wanting to see the child in her own element. She told the girl that her performance was beautiful, that it carried something honest, something real. The girl lowered her eyes, shy but glowing inside. Then the lady shared something even more unexpected. She said she had spoken to a friend, someone who worked with a youth music foundation. They often helped children with natural talent find opportunities for deeper training. She said there might be a chance for the girl to join a special program. The girl looked up sharply, unsure she heard correctly. Her mother blinked in shock. Trying to understand, the lady explained gently that nothing was guaranteed, but the foundation was willing to consider the girl. They wanted to hear her play. They wanted to see if she could be part of their next group. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a dream spoken lightly. It was a real possibility. The girl didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to hold all of the feelings rising inside her: fear, hope, disbelief, happiness. Her mother reached for her hand, squeezing it firmly, grounding her. The lady placed a hand over the girl's shoulder and said, "You don't have to fear the future. Just keep playing." As they left the school and walked toward the bus stop, the sky had already begun turning orange. The wind felt cool. The streets were noisy, but the girl heard only the faint echo of her own music. She thought about how her life had changed in such a short time, how a simple moment playing a song for her mother had opened a door bigger than she had ever imagined. She looked up at her mother and saw the same hope reflected in her eyes. They boarded the bus together. She rested her head on her mother's shoulder as the city lights passed outside the window. Her mother whispered, "Wherever this path leads, I'll walk with you." The girl closed her eyes, letting those words sink deep into her heart. She didn't know what the future would hold, whether she would get into the program or face new challenges, whether people would cheer for her or doubt her again. But she knew one thing clearly: she would keep playing, for her mother, not for herself, for the music that had brought her this far. The world outside continued to move, unaware of the quiet promise forming inside a young girl's heart. Promise that no matter how small she felt or how big the world seemed, she would not let go of the gift that had carried her out of the shadows and into the light. And somewhere deep inside, she believed her journey was only beginning.